Hi guys, Mr. Story again. We're going to continue to work with slope-intercept form. And remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And remember, that's where m is the slope of my line and b is the y-intercept of my line. Now, what I want to do today is I want to be able to take information like the slope and the y-intercept and build the equation, right? So can we build the equation given the two pieces of information that the equation would tell us? Well, remember, it's always going to be y equals mx plus b. So it's just going to be a matter of us taking these variables and these values and putting them in their appropriate location in the equation. So let's start with our first example. Number one, right? M, my slope, is 2. All right, and remember, my slope is always in front of my x as a multiplier, as a coefficient. So when I go to write this, it's always going to be y equals. That's how we start slope-intercept form every time. Well, next up is my slope. In this case, it's 2. Followed by my x, which is always there. Now, before I write plus or minus, I always like to take a look at my y-intercept and see if it's positive or negative so I can write my equation as cleanly as possible. Notice that my y-intercept b is 7, positive 7. So when I go to write that in my final equation, I would write plus 7. That is a slope-intercept form equation with a slope of 2 and a y-intercept of positive 7. Let's try another one. My slope is 1/4. So again, y equals. My slope is 1/4. The x is kind of the teller of where my slope is. So that needs to be attached to my slope or multiplied by my slope. Notice my y-intercept this time is -6. So what does that mean? Well, instead of plus, I'm going to write minus so that I can keep things as clean as possible. Technically, you could write plus -6, but in my opinion, I think it just looks cleaner when we just use minus instead of plus negative. Y equals 1/4 x minus 6. Follow slope-intercept form. Rate of change of -3. Remember, rate of change and slope, they mean the same thing, right? So if we say, oh, a line has a rate of change of -3, that's just like saying it has a slope of -3. So we'll treat this no differently. Well, we'll start like we have been. Y equals. Well, my slope is and rate of change are -3. I need the x to follow. Now, notice this one says goes through the origin. At what point on my y-axis is my line intersecting my y-intercept or my y-axis if it's going through the origin? Well, we have to think about where is the origin? Well, the origin is 0, 0. So if I write that out like that, what you'll notice is I have an ordered pair just like these, right? And notice what we were looking at in those ordered pairs. We were looking at the second number. So here we'll look at the second number. So what's that mean? Well, that means our y-intercept in this case is 0. So we'll write plus 0. Seems kind of unnecessary, doesn't it? We can actually write this equation as y equals -3x, and we're done. And you're like, well, Mr. Starr, what about the plus b? Well, the plus b is technically there. We just don't have to write it. So again, it's all about writing things kind of as cleanly as possible at the very end. So even though this answer is appropriate and correct technically, this guy right here is the one we want. Y equals -3x. What if I have a slope of 0 and a y-intercept of 9? Well, let's look. Again, starting, and notice I'm not doing anything different here. I'm starting y equals. My slope is 0, followed by the x, because that's how I can tell if it's the slope. And guess what? My y-intercept is +9, so I'll write plus 9. And again, very similar to our last one, we can clean something up here because we know that any value, it doesn't matter what value for x, if I'm multiplying it by 0, well, that's just going to become 0. So technically speaking, I could write this like this, 0 plus 9. Well, even further, I can do better than that, right? I can go y equals 9, because isn't 0 plus 9 just 9 all the time? If we take a look at our last example, notice we have some different type of information. Notice they're saying our slope is undefined. So in our brain, we need to think, hey, what kind of lines have undefined slope? Well, remember, those are vertical lines. So we're looking for a vertical line that crosses the y-axis. Well, it just doesn't kind of work. Notice in this one, they actually give us the x-intercept. So again, we're not going to be able to like take this and put this in here because those are two pieces of information that really don't fit this mold, right? What could I do? Write the word undefined in front of the x? Like, no, that's not really going to make sense. Could I put an undefined value there? Yeah, you could, but it's not really going to tell us a whole lot. And even further, what about the b? Remember, the b is the y-intercept, and I can't just force an x-intercept in there. That's not what this calls for. So I need to do my own type of thinking here and understand that, hey, look, you know, maybe I just need to think about this one a little bit. Well, let's draw a quick graph here. Here's a graph, okay? Notice we need to include an x-intercept of 2, 0. Well, that's 1, 2, right here's 2, 0. So according to my slope, I need a vertical line that goes through that ordered parallel. Okay, so let's draw one. But what's the equation of that? Right? But well, we knew a horizontal line or a slope of 0. That was a flat kind of left to right line, and that looked like this. So that turned out to be a y== equation. Kind of a special case here. Anytime we have undefined, we're actually going to have an x= equation. So this number 5 is kind of like a special case. Whenever we're talking about undefined slope, again, it's hard to like put that in here because none of those values really fit. So we need to kind of do our own type of thinking. Things that have 0 slope are going to be a y= equation. Things that have undefined slope are going to be an x= equation. So what does x equal in this case? Well, what is my x value in my ordered pair? 2. So actually, we're done right there. X = 2 is the equation of an undefined sloped line through an x-intercept of 2, 0. Many different examples there, guys. But that's all I have for you today. We'll talk to you in the next one.